This is the Metaspeed Edge Paris. It's got the same foam, the same last, the same stack height, and the same drop as the Metaspeed Sky Paris. But these two shoes really couldn't be more different. It's time to lace up the Metaspeed Edge Paris and take it for a run. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kofuzi and I'm a non-elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today, I'm talking to you guys all about the Metaspeed Edge Paris. And I'm also gonna talk a lot about the Metaspeed Sky Paris. But before I give you my thoughts on these two similar looking shoes, I do wanna go over some disclosures. ASICS sent me these shoes for the purpose of review, so I didn't have to pay for them. However, nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their shoe in this video. And no one's gonna get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Metaspeed Edge Paris, and let's start with the specs. This is a 39.5 millimeter stack height shoe in the heel with a 5 millimeter drop, giving us 34.5 millimeters of PIBA foam in this shoe, which is the exact same numbers that we see in the Metaspeed Sky Paris. This shoe also has a carbon fiber plate, which is also available in the Metaspeed Sky Paris. And the shoes for their uppers have Motion Wrap 2.0 in a last that is the same last and material. So far on paper, the two shoes are identical, and perhaps a really good reason why we shouldn't rely too much on paper specs. There are some differences though that are notable even without putting either of these two shoes on, and that's by looking at the outsole. Now, while they both have ASICS grip, the same rubber compound, there are two different patterns of outsole and two different colors. The Metaspeed Edge has the black outsole, whereas the Sky has the pink outsole. The pink outsole of the Sky also has the little notch cut out on the pinky toe. And the other notable difference between these two shoes is in the black and yellow badging that's available towards the toes of the shoe. The Edge Paris has more black on top of the black and yellow badging, where the Sky Paris has more of an even split between the black and the yellow. And the reason for this visual difference is because it indicates the plate positions that is the key differentiator between these two shoes. The Edge Paris has more of a sharp angle going from high in the heel to low towards the forefoot in terms of the plate position, whereas the Metaspeed Sky Paris has more of a parallel high position. It starts out high in the heel and stays high in the forefoot, and the black and yellow badging is indicative of that. The other difference between these two shoes, which is noticeable on the spec sheet but requires a little bit more of a fine-tuned eye to be able to see, is that the rocker shape is very different between these two shoes. The Edge Paris has a rocker that starts much earlier, whereas the Sky Paris has a very late rocker, staying nearly flat throughout most of the forefoot. Altogether, these two shoes come in at almost the identical weight, with the Edge Paris only coming in at 2 grams heavier at 185 grams or 6.5 ounces. Now that we've got the paper specs out of the way, let's actually lace up the shoes and see what it's like to run in them. And I'll say that the Metaspeed Edge Paris was definitely designed for a runner who is not me. This is not my favorite marathon running shoe, and it's quite a stark difference from what I experienced in the Metaspeed Sky Paris. The Metaspeed Edge Paris is a much firmer shoe, even though it has the same stack height, drop, and foam as the Sky Paris, which I called a shoe that was very soft to the extent of being a bit mushy when you're really pushing the pace at 5K or faster efforts. It certainly feels like it's a fast shoe, and I could feel all the premium materials in them, but something about this shoe just disagrees with the way that I want to run. And for me to be able to get along with this shoe, I felt like I had to spend a lot of energy, at least at marathon efforts and slower, to be able to run in it well, to kind of understand what the shoe was trying to do and try to feel what the materials that were put in together here we're trying to accomplish. I could still get a lot out of it. I could get a lot out of the PIBA. I could get a lot out of the carbon fiber plate, but it just took a lot of work for me to be able to get there, and it was very distracting for me on the run, and I found it very difficult to get into a rhythm with this shoe that felt surprisingly firm. But when I picked up the pace past threshold and into 5K efforts and faster, that's when the shoe really started to come alive for me. And I think a big part of that is because I'm avoiding a lot of the transition from the high plate position to the low plate position. And I think that at those faster paces, I'm riding mostly on the toes, and that's when the foam really started to speak to me, and I felt like the carbon was stiff and springy, which I thought was really pleasant for really trying to push the pace and go faster. In the Metaspeed Edge Paris, I felt like ASICS has made one of the most exciting 5K, 10K racing shoes since the Takumi Sen. The upper is snug and confidence inspiring. The foam is really snappy. The design of the shoe in the forefoot for me encouraged a very fast turnover that had a lot of great pop to it. The outsole was nice and grippy, and overall it was a lightweight, aggressive race shoe, and it made me want to line up and shoot for a 5K PB. But ASICS isn't marketing this shoe as a 5K, 10K racer. They're not pricing it as a 5K, 10K racer, although I really kind of wish that they would. And so these shoes are really supposed to be alternatives to each other. The Metaspeed Edge Paris is for one type of runner, and the Metaspeed Sky Paris is for another type of runner. And now ASICS has been trying to instruct us all on the way to kind of sort ourselves into one camp versus the other. And they've been talking about stride runners versus cadence runners. And it's since the beginning been very confusing, and it continues to be very confusing. And so here are a couple of ways that I found that people are generally starting to sort themselves into these two camps. One of the ways that I'm starting to see people sort themselves is that midfoot, forefoot strikers are tending to reach for the Sky version of these two shoes, and midfoot, or more predominantly heel foot strikers, are reaching for the Metaspeed Edge. And for whatever reason, ASICS doesn't really like it when you kind of simplify the shoes into foot strike position. But if we just look at the US marathon trials and which ASICS athletes ran in which shoe, we had Clayton Young and McKenna Myler racing in the Metaspeed Sky Paris. And then we had Elkanah Kebet, Sarah Hall, Caroline Rotich, and Lindsay Flanagan all running in the Metaspeed Edge Paris. So it's not a perfect way of distinguishing it, but for me, I'm going to say for most people, since you won't have a chance to try on both of these shoes at running retail, because I don't think running retail is going to be carrying both models. I think that if you're a heel striker, then I would consider the Edge Paris, and everyone else, I think you're probably going to, by a large margin, prefer the Sky Paris. Now, it's a shame that running retail isn't going to be able to carry both of these shoes, because I don't think that the heel striker versus forefoot striker is a perfect way of sorting people into one shoe versus the other. It's really trying them on that's going to tell you which one you prefer. And I don't think that for most people, it's going to be close. One is going to feel soft and the other isn't. And that's going to depend on what your foot likes to do when you're running at marathon efforts. And I think that's the key. These are marathon shoes, so you really want to be able to test them at marathon efforts to see which one feels softer when. And I guess the final way to look at it is the way that I kind of started talking about these two shoes, is that I love the Metaspeed Sky Paris for me at marathon efforts, and I love the Metaspeed Edge for me at 5K efforts and faster. And by the way, at 6.5 ounces, the Metaspeed Edge Paris is lighter than the Takumi Sen 10. And so unless there are stack height rules that prevent you from running in a 39.5 millimeter stack height shoe for your next 5K, I say that this actually could be a really great option for those speedy runners out there looking to hit their next PB, regardless of whether you're a stride or cadence runner. But at $250, it's going to be hard for me to recommend it that way. All right, we're already starting to talk about price a little bit about these shoes, so let's start getting into the final portion of the video where I get into some pairing options for these shoes and some alternatives. So for the pairing options, if you like the Edge and you want to run in the Edge Paris, I think there's two other shoes in the ASICS lineup that could stack up really well. I think for your daily training, and this is a shoe I haven't fully reviewed yet, but I do think that this is going to be a good companion, is the ASICS Cumulus 26. There's a lot of changes to the Cumulus this year, especially if you're looking at the outsole, but I think that the running dynamics of the Cumulus runner are going to line up very well with an edge runner. So if you are the person that prefers the Cumulus over the Nova Blast, then I think the Edge might be a really good option for you, and the Cumulus is going to continue being a great daily trainer for you. And then for your speed work, I think that the Magic Speed 3 is going to line up really well. I feel like the Magic Speed 3 is probably the closest available option for a lot of people to try in terms of distinguishing between Sky Paris and Edge Paris. I feel like the Magic Speed 3, although this is more akin to the previous Edge Plus versus the Edge Paris, and it has a different foam than any of those shoes have, but I feel like it has a setup that's very Edge-like. It has a plate in it that goes from high in the heel to low in the forefoot, and it's really designed for a quick turnover, and it's a little bit firmer than you would think for a shoe that has the same foam as the Nova Blast. So that's another way to kind of like test out without testing the Edge, is to see if you really like the Magic Speed 3 at easier paces or even marathon effort paces. For me, I only enjoy the Magic Speed 3 once I'm really getting turned over in it, a lot like how I like the Edge Paris. So I think that if you need a speedy workout shoe for those shorter distance intervals and you don't want to use your carbon plate eraser, I think the Magic Speed 3 is going to be another great shoe to look at. Now let's talk about the buying guide and some alternatives for the shoe, which again might give you some clues as to whether the Edge Paris is for you. The Edge Paris comes in at $250, which I think is a good price for this marathon racing shoe. Some alternatives that I think you should also look at. First, I think the closest one is probably going to be the Hoka Rocket X2. Now this is another shoe which for me felt firmer than it needed to be. It's also a lot heavier than I think it should be, but it felt firm, where I know a lot of you felt like this was a really soft and comfortable shoe to be able to run your marathon pace efforts in. And I feel like if you're loving the Rocket X2, you probably will really enjoy the Edge Paris, and vice versa. The Rocket X2 retails at $250, so the same price, although it is very much heavier. And then the other shoe that I think lines up well against the Edge Paris, not so much because of the mechanics, but more because of the speeds at which I like them, which are not the intended marathon effort speeds, and that's the On Cloudboom Echo 3. This is a really fun, fast shoe. It's low to the ground, so for those of you who want that road flat feel, this is a very speedy shoe that I don't love at marathon effort or for longer sessions on the road, but if I'm going to be going fast, this is a shoe that's really fun to pick up and lace up. This shoe retails at $285, so quite a bit more expensive, and it has the shortest lifespan at 4 anticipated marathons worth of running. So those are my thoughts on the Metaspeed Edge Paris and whether this could be the right option for you. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions, or really better yet, you should come to the live stream that I do Monday through Friday over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel, because you can ask questions there and I can ask a bunch of follow-up and help you figure all this out there. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?